Hi guys and welcome back. It's Tuesday again. We're going to do another time lapse. Hopefully you guys really enjoyed the last one that we did last week. This week we're doing a nice little lion piece. It's going to take up most of the bicep. It's going to be a fairly large piece in a very big sort of saturated area of grey. Sometimes that can be a bit tricky to get a nice flat spot of all the same tone, but I'll hopefully talk you through that and we'll sort of work out how I achieve certain things. We've got a couple of different textures going on as well. So we've got sort of a deserty, sort of sandy look. We've also got some water. Again, we're going to obviously be using just black and grey tones, but by using white highlights, we're going to be able to get reflections and little highlights on stones and pebbles just to give us that distinction between the two different textures. So yeah, hopefully you'll find something interesting. Let's jump straight into it. So let's fire it up. So I felt like I had a better angle than last time. I've actually got it strapped to my light that I have in front of me, so hopefully my head won't get in the way. The angle does look a little bit extreme to start with, but you do kind of get used to it. And yeah, my hands and my head don't get in the way, so hopefully we'll be able to see a bit more detail than last week. I'm going to try out a few more different angles as I move forward, but like I say, this one did seem to work quite well. So the stencil's on. It's pretty basic stencil wise. There's nothing too wild going on. Same as before, I tend to start at the bottom, work my way up. This is just going to help me make sure that I'm not rubbing off my stencil and that I'm not sort of causing any problems and confusion in that sense. Normally, I'd say I try and get some heavy blacks in, just so I've got that black point. There weren't, or there isn't any sort of really heavy black in the bottom of this piece because it starts off being the reflection in this water. So I just started sort of mapping out all the tones in the water, which I just did there. That just allowed me to keep the edge of that lion in without me having to put any sort of lines in. So through healing, that is going to go quite soft and blend out into the skin. But that's going to work in our favor in the sense that this is supposed to look like a reflection. So I don't want it to be super crisp, super solid, especially in the reflection bit. That's supposed to have that nice sort of reflection in water vibe. So yeah, the softer it can sit within the background, as in the surface of the water, the better we're going to get. So just before this bit, I went in with a 3-round liner, just to carve out the eyes and the nose and a bit of the mouth. All of the background at the start was with a 27 curve mag. I'm now in with a 15 curve mag, which is just blocking out all the fur on the lion. So with fur on lions and tigers or any big cats, mags are amazing because you can use them on the side. It's going to give you that natural sort of fur texture. If you run your machine a little bit slower and sort of hit your mag across the surface of the skin, what's going to happen, you're in essence going to be doing sort of stipple shading, but with a mag. You're going to be working faster than your machine. So you're going to be jumping, so you're not going to get a smooth black and grey, but by sort of hitting the skin and almost doing dot work with the mag, it's going to give you that texture of fur really easy, really quick, and it's going to mean you're not going to have to go in and do each individual strand. You can just whip over the surface and it'll just give you that really nice sort of furry texture. I use it a lot with all my big cats, and it does save you a hell of a lot of time, and it gives you a really nice effect. So I've blocked out a big section of black in the middle. That's going to be one of the darkest bits. So that's in between its two paws. At this point, I've now got a black point. I can go back through the fur, just make sure that all of that works tonally and make sure that I'm not losing anything in the way of value and contrast. So just topping up a bit more of the line just so that there's a definition between the water and the line itself. It is going to be very close in textures and tones just because, again, it's not a line stud there. It's supposed to be the reflection, and that's what I need to sort of keep in the back of my mind throughout the whole of this piece. So I'm back in with my 3-round liner, just hitting up some of these little pebbles. These are going to give us a little bit of dynamic, little character to the piece. So this is basically the same as how I do water droplets, just to be a little bit more stronger, a little less smoother, just so they look like little rocks and pebbles, but they're basically the same sort of technique as the water droplets. And like I say, it's just going to break up the bulk of the water, especially because as we're trying to get sort of the desert and sort of sandy, rocky stuff at the top, and we want the water underneath, it's quite hard to get that sort of distinction between the two sort of separate sort of textures. Obviously the water being smooth and the the desert being sand. So by putting these rocks in, it allows me to put little ripples around them just to really ramp it home that it is water and it's not like the sandy desert. So big 27 mag, just to try and smooth everything out. I just want to try and hit the skin, just really saturate with a light wash, just to take it off skin tone really. I'm not trying to put anything in the way of really heavy dark color. I just want a nice gradient from the shoreline where the little cub sat, just dropping that all the way through the skin until we get to the head of the line where it's just going to be fading off back into skin. So that's going to give us that nice sort of cast look to it. I'm going to be sort of mirroring this sort of look and feel as we move up the piece, just so that we're continuing with this sort of depth of field look, just because we've got this big landscape sort of section. So yeah, just carving out the outside. It's technically like a puddle the way this image works, so there is an edge to the whole of it. We are going to be working on the inside of the bicep later on, so I wasn't too fussed with how wide the background was going, because we can always push and pull that once we get the next sort of pieces in. Add in a few more little stones and rocks around the outside, and then add in some texture. So again, with my 3-round liner, I'm just doing some real loose sort of dot work, dots and lines, just to give me a texture to the sort of land element. So I want all the water to be nice and smooth, just a real smooth gradient running through the whole of it, whereas the deserty area, that's going to have a lot of dot work and a lot of texture, just so I've got that real sort of, so I'm really ramping it home that there are two separate textures. So now we're just carving out a little bit of the cub. So the cub's got some really big highlights around the outside. I didn't want to put too many highlights into the lion. The more highlights you put in, the sharper the image is going to look and more in focus. Because I want the reflection to be a reflection, I only really wanted the highlights to be in the cub. So I want the cub to be very much in focus, and then the lion, the adult lion, to be just the reflection. So at this point, I got the bulk of the texture into the body of the small cub. And now, same as what we did with the water, I'm just blasting out just a light wash through all the desert. I'm just going to carve the edge of the cub out, ready for me to get some whites in later, and that's going to then just give me that real crisp highlight. So we went for a little bit of a break, a little bit of lunch, just a quick 5-minute stretch. So ideally, before we have like a proper big break, I wanted to try and get all of the land in, just so I'm trying to ditch all of my stencil. It's one of those pieces where you can't really get to a point to lose your stencil, just because I want everything to be nice and sort of realistic, and with that nice soft landscape with all the textures. It was very much a case of yeah, we've just got to sort of keep ramping it in and just keep going from start to finish really. A lot of stencil maintenance here, in the sense of trying not to rub my stencil off, so a lot of wiping down, and a lot of sort of just being aware that I've got stencil that I don't want to destroy. All of these mountain ranges at the top, this was pretty much packed in black, with a little bit of a fade into dark wash, just so it's not just a really heavy black section. That will make more sense once it heals. Now going back with the light wash, just to give us that nice, again, that second gradient from the mountains down to the water's edge. Again, just to give us that depth of field, just to make it look like we've got this big, fast open space. So one thing that I like the most about this piece is you get the little cub looking very sort of almost lost in the background, but that just adds to the drama of the piece. So now we're up in the clouds. Again, we've got a third texture now. So we've gone from water to ground to sky. The clouds is very similar to water. In fact, it's sort of a hybrid of both. So just using the light wash just to really just hit in between the stencil, just the areas. I kind of need that stencil to disappear a little bit, just because the lines on the stencil are going to throw you off. So because I want them to look like clouds, so nice and soft and fluffy, having the lines of the stencil still on the skin makes it look like you've put heavy outlines around stuff. It's very easy to keep working to try and hide those lines and get everything darker, but you're just going to run the risk of going too dark, packing too much in. So what I like to do is just give it a real quick hit, get everything in that I think I need in, and then just keep, as I'm wiping, just keep hitting that with a bit more soap, just to try and get the stencil off, and you can see what you're left with. At that point, once the stencil's gone, you can top up any bits that need topping up, but it just stops any risk that you're going to be overworking, putting too much into the skin that you don't need. So back with the big 27, just ramping up all that background just to get it into that nice texture. Like I say, for me, hitting big areas and trying to get everything nice and smooth and one tone, it's working not any faster than what I would, but bigger strokes. It's not going to pack in, so you are going to have to layer up. Obviously you're going to be irritating the skin, so it's worth hitting it, moving, coming back, and just hitting those areas of the skin just enough so you can see what's going on. So here we blast on a load of Bactine. What I tend to do with the Bactine, spray it and wrap it, just leave it for 5 minutes. That's just going to take the edge off, it's help take a little bit of the swelling out. It's going to help take a bit of the redness out, and it's going to make your client feel that little bit easier. Anything with lidocaine in is going to do the same thing. Like I say, because of the way that I'm working on this piece, hitting it sort of quite big and open and trying to get those nice smooth areas of grey across the land, the water and the sky, I am irritating the skin quite a lot. The other thing this is going to do as well, the Bactine will destroy your stencil. So at this point I've taken off all the stencil that I need to use for my reference. So at this point my stencil can all go because I'm kind of done with it. So once all this is settled down and we've had the 5-minute break, once we come back, hopefully all the rest of the stencil off the top of the arm will have gone, and I can just nip over any little bits just before we get into the white highlights. So straight into the white. When it came back, everything was looking pretty good, so we're just going to start hitting up all these whites. So like I say, the one bit that I wanted to get in the most was the cub. So this is just getting all of those highlights. So I've got my light sort of coming from sort of the body. So just making sure that my point of reference for the light is all the same. We don't want any sort of highlights on the wrong side and things like that. So I've hit the cub once, but I will be going back into that just to really ramp up those whites. So all these stones that we put in earlier, this is putting all those ripples around, which is just going to give you that idea that they're in water and you've got the ripples. All the stones in the foreground that are around the cub, I want to put some little highlights in, which is just going to raise them up that little bit, make them look like little 3D stones. I'm only doing that around the ones nearest to the cub, because we want to have that depth of field. We don't want to be putting highlights all the way back down towards the mountain, because in real terms you're not going to see those. So we only want to stay focused on where the cub is. At this point I started magging in a load of white. So this is with a big 27, just to put some highlights straight the way across the lion. That's going to ramp up the idea that we've got reflections over the top and he's not sat there, he is just a reflection in the water. White can sometimes be really frustrating. It really frustrates me how thick the pigment is, but that's just the nature of like colour pigments in general. Especially being a black and grey artist, I do tend to get quite messy, so you can see that I tend to wipe down quite a lot. It only takes 2 seconds to wipe down the skin, but it's going to allow you to see where you're at and what bits need re-hitting. So yeah, just make sure you're keeping everything nice and clean, and that way you're just not going to get into too much of a mess and start sort of overworking areas of skin where you may not necessarily need to get some in. So yeah, re-hitting the lion, the little cub, getting those highlights really nice and punchy, just re-hitting some lines all the way across the top of that mountain just to make that really pop against the sky. And then yeah, just going over and just making sure that everything's really nice and punchy. Like I said in the last video, we don't want any sort of like wet whites. We want everything to be nice and solid. There's no point putting stuff in if you're not going to see it. So one final wipe, and I think that was pretty much it. A little bit of Bactine, try and settle it, and then it's time to take some photos. So the finished piece ended up looking a little bit like this. So size-wise, we ended up filling most of the bicep, as you just saw. Obviously, this is a slightly different angle, so you can see the whole piece, and you can see the drama that's involved in it with the depth of field. You can see the whites are over the top of the lion, which really ramp up the idea that he's sat in the water more than sat on it. And you can sort of see the ripples. It's hard to pick them up on the photo, but there are ripples around all those little stones, and especially at the front of the water's edge where the little cub is, just to really make sure you can see the difference between the texture in the sand and the stones and then the smoothness of the water. The contrast at the back that we've got with the mountains and then that gradient running down, you can see where I've sort of packed in the grey. A lot of this is going to settle down a lot more than what it looks like on here, and most of this is just irritated skin, but there is a load of grey wash hit across all of this area. So even once it heals, it is going to be off skin tone with all those nice little dot worky textures in the deserty area, which is going to just look like little stones and pebbles and just give us that nice texture. The clouds are going to drop down massively as well. Again, we've got more stuff to go in, but the bulk of the shoulder is going to act as the sky, and then the clouds and then the grey. Once that heals down, the effect's going to come out a lot more, that it's going to look like sky. But with the 3 sort of separate areas, so the sky, the land and the water, I think we really sort of hit the nail on the head with the different textures. And overall, yeah, the piece was really nice. It was really big. It was quite testing, trying to get those smooth tones across the whole of the surface of everything. But my client sat really well. It allowed me to really hit that skin and get everything really nice and saturated. So there you go, guys. That was week 2 of my time lapses. That was a nice little LION CUB sort of sentimental type piece. Like I say, lots of saturation, lots of textures, lots of different techniques to get different sort of looks and feels to the different textures, like the water and the sand. Hopefully you found something interesting. If there's anything you want to know, make sure to drop it in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop me a like. And if you're not subscribed already, make sure to click the subscribe button, subscribe to my channel for all my updates. Make sure to click the bell icon. That'll keep you updated with notifications every time I post a video. Time lapses are going to be Tuesdays, hopefully, every week. And then I'm going to be putting out some more tutorials that I've got in the pipelines in between. So stay tuned for some more interesting content. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you all for checking out my video, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.